Hi, Liz. Just for the crowd and introduce Liz. Liz is the taper coach. And Liz, I'd love you to introduce yourself and let people know what you do.
My name is Liz. Elisabeth Krijtenberg for the Dutch people, a little bit more understandable than for the English crowd. I am a taper coach, and taper is not a mistake. Tapering means tapering medication, reducing medication very slowly. And I've been doing that for 5 years now. Um, I'm 45 at the moment. I have two kids. I don't know what more to say at this moment. What do you want to
The,
know?
that's okay. So, why did you get into taper coaching? So, why did you get into this life?
So my journey started in 2012. I got into a hard situation where I wanted to decide. Well, I wanted to divorce my husband. That was not an easy thing for me to do, and I sort of like split in the middle, and I started to experience severe depression. And I did not really get the right support immediately, I think. So it progressed into something that the medical staff sort of thought like needed to be treated with an antidepressant. So, like many of with me in this world, I was offered an antidepressant. I didn't want it, but they convinced me it was really the best thing to do. And you feel so horrible that you have no decision power anyway. So you just sort of give in, and that's what happened. In 2016, that medication pooped out on me. It is a response of medication that happens about 25% of the time for people who use an antidepressant. And this caused me to be in a situation where I was on medication, but it was also causing a lot of, I would call it withdrawal symptoms. So I was feeling depression, anxiety, my hair was falling out, I was having digestion problems, I was losing weight, I couldn't concentrate, it started actually with falling asleep on my desk at the office. So somehow my energy level started to drop dramatically, and this is where my first encounter started with the medication was doing weird stuff, but I didn't know it back then. I was still thinking like something is happening that I need help with. So I started with talking with the medical professionals, and they said maybe you should updose. I did that. That had a horrible effect on me. Within 10 days, I felt like I was going to explode, really, like almost physically explode. There was no holding the tension inside of me. And so they put me on lorazepam, which is a benzodiazepine. And the benzodiazepine is medication that is severely um, addictive for the body. So it wasn't addictive for me for the mind, but it caused physical dependency within a couple of weeks. If I look back at my notes, I was experiencing dependency issues within a couple of weeks, which means that the effect goes down and you sort of need to increase the dose. I was blaming it all on my own well being. I was not well. I needed medication. It was so similar to everything that I experienced before. And so I was offered a different antidepressant, and the different antidepressant was refused by me because I thought I had no depression before this. I have no idea what's going on with me. All these symptoms have nothing to do with depression. I do feel depressed as well, but there's something going on. And so then I decided to wait with taking another antidepressant. Was there something you wanted to say? I saw you take a breath.
Yeah. So, what? I mean, why did the counselors or therapists believe that you needed, or doctors believe that you were depressed? Like, what symptoms were there, and where you clearly knew that it really
I
wasn't
was
depression?
depressed. I was definitely depressed. Like I had no good coping with what was going on in my body at that moment. I felt very upset, very scared. I couldn't experience positive things very well. I was very anxious and uptight. I'm not sure looking back if I was really depressed. I mean, so the first time, yes, that was related to my internal affairs, issues inside of me, like how can I divorce and break up my family? That was like a whole issue in my life that I couldn't really deal with. I had no skills, I had no support, I didn't know how to process it. But in 2016, all that had passed. I worked through all that. I was actually very happy with all the choices that I made. So I didn't make sense of it, but the doctors did say this just means you have a second episode. And I remember feeling completely betrayed by my body. I just thought like, so what? Even if you have a good life, you do your homework, you work on yourself, you try to be conscious about the choices that you make, and then still your body can completely give out on you and suddenly you're in hell. I was in shock. And so I refused the antidepressant at first because I thought this is not happening. Sort of like I was just refusing the experience that I was having, and it didn't make sense to me. And so because I had that feeling of I'm ready to explode now, they offered me lorazepam. I told them I didn't want oxazepam, which is a sort of the brother of the lorazepam, and it just works a little bit um, shorter. It has a shorter half life, so it
Yeah,
sort of
so
goes out of your system within 4 hours, and lorazepam 6 hours.
and that's why you reason you chose lorazepam as opposed to the other one. Sorry, can't remember the word. Is it
Actually,
Oxaris?
I didn't know anything about it. The doctor said we can give you something, and in the previous in the episode of depression that I had in 2012, they did give me oxazepam as well to relieve anxiety. I didn't like it. I took one and then I would sort of have some sort of relaxation, but within a couple of hours, like it came back with a vengeance. So this is what I gave as a feedback to the doctors. I said, like, look, just whatever you do for me, I don't want that. So whatever you're going to give me, that is not my friend. It doesn't help me. I feel anxious within, a couple of hours, and then it's sort of even worse. So they said, oh, no, don't worry about that. There are all kinds of different medication. We can help you. And so they gave me lorazepam, but I had no idea that they were just like brother and sister. And it worked differently a little bit. So I just took it and I took it and I was reading the pamphlet, the paper that comes with it. And it said, like, you have to be careful, dependency, blah, blah, blah. But I have no idea what that means. But I did ask like 10 different professionals, health professionals around me in those couple of months where I asked them, should I really be taking this still? Like, isn't this against the advice of the pharmaceuticals? Like, why are they giving this advice and why are you still sort of prescribing it to me? Is this really the solution? And they said, oh, Liz, you're way too anxious about all this stuff and you're so critical and you just allow yourself to take some of this. It's really helpful. And once you feel better, it's very easy to come off. Don't worry about that. We'll get you off. And that is where it all went down the drain. This is where I found out there's something like a benzodiazepine withdrawal syndrome when I tried to come off. In between that, by the way, I did cave into the pressure of the withdrawal that I was already going through. So the antidepressant that I had been on pooped out. I tapered that in 4 weeks because that was what they told me to do. Like every week, I just dropped a step. It was from 40 to 30 to 20 to 10. Goodbye. And then it left me there. And I was still convinced I'm not depressed. Something else is going on. And so I refused antidepressant. But after 3, 4 months, I just was ready to jump off the roof or try something else. And so I started a drug called venlafaxine, which is Effexor for a lot of people if they use the brand. And it within 2 weeks, even though I went through hell going on that medication, my body was refusing it the first week and a half. I was so ill that they were shocked as well. But then it just worked like a charm. It just got me up. I felt good. All my withdrawal symptoms were gone. My depression was gone. Everything was good. I was ready for life. So then I decided I would taper the lorazepam. And this is where I found out that this was not going to be an easy ride. I was immediately ill when I tried to taper the lorazepam. And it took me, to make this story a little bit short, it was 8 months to
Mm.
taper that slowly but surely, and then I had a year to recover. So in that time I was mostly on the couch or in bed. I couldn't go out. I wasn't talking to anybody. I didn't do anything with friends. I couldn't bear light or sounds much. I wasn't watching TV. I couldn't read a book. It was very isolating and very a tormenting experience.
And like
That's how
how
I became a taper coach.
so from there you thought because you've gone through such a dreadful experience that you can help other people because obviously, it took you 8 months to a year to just kind of get off it and then, afterwards as well. And like how common is benzodiazepine withdrawal?
So I think it's a lot more common than people think. People are completely unaware of this fact. So the first things that people experience when they try to stop a benzodiazepine is probably unrest and anxiety. And they a lot of times think that, oh, this means that I need it. That means that I'm using it, rightfully, because otherwise I'm very anxious, or otherwise I can't sleep. So people get sleeping problems. So there are some basic withdrawal symptoms. I think that probably 25 to 50% will experience withdrawal symptoms. Not all of them will create a withdrawal syndrome. That is probably a smaller percentage, maybe 10%. But the numbers about that are not very clear. It's very unclear for doctors when this withdrawal syndrome occurs. They have no idea about it, so they don't report it. People themselves don't know, they don't report it. I think that with the coming of the internet, in the last 5, 6 years, we've created support groups all over the world. On Facebook, for example, people collecting themselves together and peer-to-peer support groups. They share information about the drug, about how they taper the medication, what's working for them, what's not working for them, because the doctors have absolutely no clue. So when it comes to numbers, we're just still guessing mostly.
So so like with syndrome, could you expand on that further? So what do you mean? Because obviously you get symptoms and you get syndrome. Could you expand on like syndrome a bit further? Like how do people know they're suffering from withdrawal syndrome?
Yeah, so actually right now I think they also try to give it a different name. It's called bind, which is actually the damage that is done in the body by the benzodiazepine and is sort of left after quitting the benzodiazepines. What actually happens is that the body has adjusted itself like it's supposed to do to a chemical balance. So what happens is that we create such a weird chemical balance by taking benzodiazepines that the body's nervous system starts to adjust significantly. And once you try to reduce the medication, it creates all these symptoms. So um, what the benzodiazepines do actually is they increase the the feeling of rest. So let's just say somehow it puts the puts your foot on the brake. It relaxes your muscles, it relaxes the transmission of signals somehow in the body. It's not only the muscles, it's the mind, it's organs. There is a complete reduction of signal transmission, in my opinion. Nobody talks about it in that way. They think it's only about GABA receptors, and GABA is the brake neurotransmitter. Let's call it that way. And then you have glutamate, which is the um, it's the gas pedal. It says to the body, go, go, go. So it creates all these signals. And because the benzodiazepines get into the body, um, it creates sort of like an overload of brake signals. And your body thinks, wait a minute, if there's so much brake signal, I need to I need to create a different balance because otherwise this body is just asleep while I need to be in traffic or while I need to do my homework. So there is somehow the desire of the body to create that balance where you can be active and normal functioning. And that also, it's not only about our mind experience, but probably also for the organs. So for the heart, for the liver, for the lungs. And so when you reduce the medication, people start to experience heart palpitations. They experience breath depression. So they call it air hunger. Sometimes it's like I'm breathing, but there's no air coming in. People get muscle tension on places where they didn't know they had muscle. So there is, for example, um, a symptom that's called globus, which is sort of the contraction of the cephasicus. I don't know that word. Phosaphacus. I don't know. You probably know what I mean. So you swallow, and then there is this tension in the muscle, and people feel like they can't swallow or that they can't breathe because there's just this tension in the neck. But it is extended, this withdrawal syndrome that I would say is, it can affect your stomach, it can affect your intestines, it can affect your muscle tension. You can be extremely weak, but you can also have extreme tension in the muscle. You can have extreme nerve pains. You can have nerve pain in your teeth. You can have brain fog. You can have migraines. You can have loss of eyesight, or it's just, you can't name it, and it's probably experienced during withdrawal and purely related to benzodiazepine withdrawal.
So why did doctors prescribe
So
it?
it's
Because oh, sorry, Liz. Why do doctors prescribe it? Because obviously these withdrawals sound like terrible. Like what, I mean, if you were to put your mind in like kind of
so
like the
what
medical
usually
field.
happens, I think that most doctors didn't experience this withdrawal. The pharmaceuticals have presented this medication as being completely safe. There has not been any research after about 4 weeks, according to some doctors that I've seen on symposiums about benzodiazepines. They said, "Oh, actually, we know something about it from 1 to 2 weeks. We know very little from 2 to 4 weeks. We absolutely have no idea what happens after 6 weeks. There's no knowledge about that really." So, and do you know that this is probably one of the most prescribed drugs in the world? So I'm not talking
Wow.
about the West. I'm talking about worldwide. This is a very, very common drug which is used and also even abused. So right now, at least I know in the Netherlands, there's quite a lot of black market for the benzodiazepines. If you have an upper, if you took an upper in the how do you say, the night scene, you go out and you have a party and you've overdone it and you're just up there, then they take a downer and they take a benzodiazepine, for example. So I think it's one of the most dangerous drugs going on in the world, going around, because people have absolutely no awareness over what this is doing to the system, to the
So
nervous
by
system.
upper you mean like a stimulant, and then when you have a downer, that's something to just basically get rid of that high essentially. And
Right,
so it being on the
right.
black market as well, I mean, like how do the hospitals deal with obviously you can I don't know if you can you overdose on benzodiazepines or and like
Not so
how do
easily.
okay. Okay. So
But I don't think that hospitals and doctors easily recognize that people are actually not just having a panic attack, that they are actually having adverse responses, sometimes paradoxical effects, but also a lot of times just tolerance withdrawal
mm,
from this drug. So if this is prescribed to you, and so I think that in the Netherlands, the ones registered is 700,000. So we're about 17 million people. So I would actually say, let's say it's one like it's 1 million. You can see that there's a huge population um, for these drugs, and I think it's even a lot more. It's like almost probably every household will get this medicine in their cabinet once in their life for sure. And I think that most people will have them offered to them one day in their life.
That's crazy. And, the saying, especially from what symptoms you've described, what were the symptoms that you had when you had the withdrawal? Like, what, during those 8 months and the year afterwards, like, what symptoms did you have?
So, um, let me start with saying that if you withdraw too quickly, the symptoms are much more severe than if you do it very, very carefully. So this was something that I had to learn. Um, so I started with too big a cuts, and that created a huge panic for me. So I would try to fall asleep, and then right when you fall asleep, I think a lot of people know that feeling that when you fall asleep and then suddenly you're pushed awake as if you fall. But
Mm.
this would happen over and over and over again. Like you cannot fall asleep anymore. There will always be this anxious rush of somehow adrenaline pushing you awake, as if always something wrong, something scary is happening when you fall asleep. So there was absolutely no relaxation, but at the same time, if I wanted to tie my shoes and you bend your knee and so you lean sort of on your leg, I would start shaking as if I had already walked a marathon.
Wow.
Um, I would have flu-like symptoms. I was just completely miserable. I felt sweaty and dizzy and not able to think, not able to eat. I had diarrhea. I had very weird nerve, like stingy feelings on my skin all over. I had like sort of like goosebumps constantly sort of waving around on my body. Um, God, I'm so glad I don't remember fully all the things that I had from my head. But yeah,
No, but
once
what's
you're
love?
when you go through it, you think you really think that this is your biggest trauma that will never go away. But I can say from experience that after a while, you start to see, oh, okay, it's all in the past for me now. But I know that a lot of people are still going through this. So
But what's lovely is the fact that you've gone through it and now you're coaching people, with the withdrawal. And I would love to know about an experience with someone that you had a real positive, like kind of change, like, especially someone who's really suffering. I'd love to know, yeah, like someone that you've really helped. That would be really nice to hear.
well, so I had a very, very lovely British woman. She is in the Netherlands, but she is British from origin. And she came to me with, I think so, she was on oxazepam on quite a high dose. She was in a situation where her doctor had told her to switch to diazepam, but like let's say she was like on 60 or 70 milligrams of oxazepam, and he used the equivalent of about 12 milligrams of diazepam, which was very, very wrong to do. Like, it is not an equivalent. It should have been like 30 milligrams and not 12. So, what actually happened was she was not only going from one drug to another, which is, by the way, a good solution sometimes because the diazepam has a long half life, so it sort of is stable in the body, and the oxazepam is creating much more highs and lows, so that creates also more symptoms. It creates like I have the dose, oops, I'm in withdrawal. I have the dose, oops, I'm in withdrawal. That's what the body experiences. And the diazepam actually is just very stable. It's not dropping. So that was a good idea of the doctor, but he actually dropped her to a way too low amount. And so she experienced hell.
Mm.
And it was such a horrible experience. She went back on the oxazepam and she just didn't know what to do anymore. She felt completely stuck. So she came to me and she told me this experience. And I worked with her. She was very traumatized already, also in her early childhood. She she had grown children. She has grown children, sorry. And she had her own business. So she wanted to be able to stay afloat because she was not, insured in that way that she could afford to be away from her business for a very long time. So I've created a plan with her in how to do this. First of all, I explained also the problem with the medication, what it does to her. Nobody ever told her that, even though she was ill already for quite some time from the medication, no doctor had informed her about the consequences of these drugs. And they didn't fully recognize what was going on. And she felt anxious, depressed. Um, that was, I would say, her main fear. And she created some hypochondriac thoughts about that. So she was just very much afraid to somehow die, and she was just checking her body like, is this really normal? Am I not having a tumor or something pushing my brain? Like, what's going on? And I've been working with her for over a year. She is now on her last piece of diazepam. So in the course of tapering, first she tapered the oxazepam. I got her on a schedule with taking the oxazepam like every 4 hours. So because the half-life is so short, if you just take it 3 times a day, you wake up, I tell you, you will wake up in hell. If you take this medication and you wake up in hell because you don't dose yourself through the night, or then this is the problem. You have to dose yourself like according to the half-life of the drug. And so she calmed down a little bit with that. I've done some trauma therapy with her as well. I talk with her. She talks to me. You kind of become friends sometimes. She is a lovely, lovely person. I see so much light in her, and she is now at the last bit of diazepam. She did cross over, trusted um, my opinion about that. She did do a big piece of the taper with the oxazepam. But yeah, and she is just open, lovely, and a fighter. Like, she decided that this was not going to get her, and she would do whatever it takes. Sometimes go back to England to her daughter who gave birth to a child, and she just enjoyed her grandchild as much as she could. Was also like medicine to her.
Mm.
And yeah, this is definitely possible. But some people, to be honest, are not that lucky. So in a way, I still experience her story as a lucky story. There are people who cannot escape some of the symptoms that they experience when they taper. But if you stay on the medication, you will get symptoms as well. Most likely. Not for all. I have to say, not for all. Some people are on the drug for 30 years. I would say maybe you should stay on it, even though I know that the quality of life after 30 years has diminished. It has altered your emotions, your capability of clear thinking and of understanding, of making full connections. It will affect it. But I'm not sure if it will be worth it to taper if you've been on it for a super, super long time and you get like above your 60s. I don't know.
Why is that? So if someone's in their 60s, they're starting to produce like health problems and stuff. And I'm probably not just talking about benzodiazepine, diazepam, sorry, but I'm also talking about like alcohol. Sometimes, doctors say, look, you can't have alcohol anymore, you'll die. But say, I'm guessing that would probably be similar with benzos as well. Like there would probably be an issue if you stay with it, but then if you don't stay with, like if you pull away from it, you're in this kind of. So why would it be a good idea to stay on it until you basically your whole life?
Well, I think so. If you don't really experience that you get ill when you forget a dose, maybe I would say, maybe then you could definitely, try it. You could, I would maybe consider it and have a good conversation. But there are people who are quite old. Well, what is old? I mean, if I'm 65, you can be 95, I believe in another 30 years, definitely, or maybe another 40 years. I definitely want to go for that. But I have seen that for some people, it is quite hard to recover. So symptoms stay Very long, very long. I have seen reports from people after many, many years, and they say, like, I don't know why I did that. I was fine while I was on it. Maybe that's not completely true, because I do believe that symptoms start to occur somewhere down the line, and you might think that, okay, those symptoms were not as severe as trying to come off. So it is, I think it is a very difficult choice to make if you've been on it for a very, very, very long time. I cannot honestly say that it would, I cannot just within my conscience say that it's always the right choice to taper in this case. But if you are below 50, I would say definitely
Mm.
try to come off, but do it as slowly as possible.
And are there any cases where people should, not saying should start, it's probably not gonna, but given the circumstances they're in, they should have some benzodiazepines, or is it just like you shouldn't touch the stuff kind of thing?
You shouldn't touch the stuff. You
Yeah, yeah.
definitely shouldn't touch this stuff. It is very it's very dangerous drug, I would say. And the nice thing is in the Netherlands we have a word for drugs like heroin and cocaine, the opiates are in general like drugs. And we have a word called medicine. Oh, you have it also in English. I'm using it
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
So you have medicine and you have drugs, right? And so in this case, the word medicine is it is applicable in very how can I say that, specific situations, like emergency situations. There are moments if you haven't slept for 10 days and your body is very unwilling to somehow break that cycle, because most bodies break that cycle by themselves. Most of the time your body will get it and go to sleep, even if it's just for a little while. But sometimes people's bodies go haywire completely, and then it's, oh, I think there is a place for that. Maybe it can be used there, but never ever long term. Long term is very, very dangerous for the general health of a person. And I think that the doctors, they make an oath. They say in their oath, first do no harm. And that is not about harming a person with a knife or with beating them in the face. It is about not harming the innate ability of the body to repair itself. You only intervene if you can speed up that recovery that the body innately does. And it seems to me that with the psych medication that we have nowadays, the antidepressants that I've been on and that a lot of people are on, and the benzodiazepines, antipsychotics are the same as well. They somehow interfere in such a way that it maybe creates a bigger problem than we had before. So a lot of people experience huge depression and anxiety coming off antidepressants that they've never ever in their life experienced before.
Yeah. It like I said, benzos. I also remember there was a case with a quite prolific psychologist called Jordan Peterson. I believe he had benzodiazepine withdrawal as well, and he had to go to Russia. And apparently, it was horrific. So, that stuff
Yes.
scares me. But same
And
with antidepressants.
I'm pretty sure he is still recovering. I'm pretty
Mm.
sure he is still not fully healed. His body also did not accept normal reduction of the medication, so normal taper. And he had such a horrible side effect of the medication, which is called akathisia. I can recommend everybody who listens to this podcast and for you to look up the side effect of akathisia. It's like the most horrible, torturous symptom I think that most people can experience in their
What is
life. It
akathisia?
is okay maybe for one day. So it is an internal feeling of unrest that is so high that it almost forces you to move, and sometimes it really does force you to move. So people, if you look at videos online where people filmed themselves, you can see them that they're just in complete terror. They're shaking, And it's not only the body, it's the internal unrest. Like there's no peace, feeling of peace, there's no calmness in the thoughts, there's no experience of safety, there's just like constant fear, and the body needs to keep on moving to let go of just a little bit of the terror that's going on. So people only have a break sometimes when they sleep, and then the whole terror starts again. So this is also where people maybe sometimes decide, I can't do this. So that is one of the most feared um, symptoms. But I can tell you also, in general, if you taper safely and slowly, this is something that will not happen during tapering. It only happens with tapering done in a wrong way. And sometimes it can be a side effect of the drug the drug itself. So people go on it, and within 2 weeks they start to have these symptoms, and this is actually the symptom that is recognized by the physicians and the doctors. They know that this exists, and then hopefully they will take you off and not tell them that it is in their mind, or that they're doing it themselves, not blame the patient, but take it seriously as a side effect of a drug.
That is frustrating sometimes with doctors as well. Like they would sometimes just go, "There's nothing wrong," and obviously there's something clearly wrong. So yeah, it's good to bring awareness. And Liz, like, how do you keep up to date with all of this? Like, what do you do to make sure that you're fresh with taper coaching and benzodiazepine research?
Well, so the good thing is that no, that's said completely wrong. The
That's okay.
negative thing is that there's almost no research about this thing. So there is some research of how to taper safely, because the doctors in the Netherlands, for example, and almost all over the world, they pretend not to really know, and so they don't have to follow really slow taper plans. They don't have to listen to the patients. There's no real knowledge about it, so they don't have to update themselves just listening to what the patients are saying. We have a research now in the Netherlands trying to find out what is the correct way of tapering. And I will tell you, this is just crazy. So we already know that if you don't listen to a person's body, you will put somebody's health at serious risk. So if you put somebody in a trial and make them go through a taper plan that for them is too fast, I think it's just unethical. Because I do think that this knowledge is absolutely already available to them. So I don't at this moment have to read a lot, because there's not a lot of research on it. I think
Hmm.
that within the community of people tapering, there we are trying to study every aspect of the medication on what it possibly can do and what can be the consequences, which kind of orthomolecular supplements may possibly interfere or support the processes. So we try to understand it better and better, because a lot of really bright people are also confronted with the same issue. It's not like only just it's not the a construction worker. There are doctors who also got harmed by the medication, which is sort of a blessing for the world and the community, because at least they are taken a lot more serious than, for example, me, because I am just the coach.
Hmm.
They think it's very dangerous that just the coach is working with people, trying to support them to come off medication.
I mean, an interesting question about that. And actually, I do agree. Like in terms of qualifications, like sometimes that doesn't translate to like someone's expertise. And obviously, you've been working on it for quite a few years now, so you understand, and you've got a whole community, and that's where your research has come from different people. Um, I suppose my question is like, how would let's say someone is experiencing their loved one going through withdrawal, how would you tell them to approach uh, someone who is going through this?
So, what my experience is in all these years is that there are really wonderful people supporting their partners, their children, um, their parents. What it takes is start reading about this, maybe become a member of one of these groups, or like for example for benzodiazepines there is a group called benzobuddies.org. Benzobuddies is a group that has been there for 8, 9, 10 years already. It's filled with information and experiences, so you can inform yourself at least about like what are people going through, what is this like. My partner is saying that she's experiencing this. I don't understand. Let's see what this group of people is saying about it. What can I do to help my partner? There are, many things that a person in withdrawal cannot do. One of them is really do great research most of the time.
Mm.
You feel so ill, you need help. This is why we have doctors, because when you're ill, you're not the person to really help yourself. But we are, a lot of times, to be honest, the people in withdrawal are left to their own research. And this is a tremendous hard thing to do. So if you want to help a loved one, do the research for them. Talk to them, listen to them, respect their boundaries, respect their, I'm saying boundaries because sometimes people say like, let's go for a walk that will make you feel better. Let's go to our mother because she has such a lovely house. Let's do that. Let's go to the movies. You need to be out there. It's not like that. So you really have to start listening. It's not about walking. It's not about a different mindset. It's really about this person is in tremendous need of care. Like maybe a massage every day is needed. Cook for your loved ones. Clean for your loved ones. Be there when they're scared. Don't leave them alone too much. Being alone can be horrible. So those are basic things, that I think is helping most of my clients and most of the community that I've been in for a couple of years now.
Are there any particular kind of type of people that get addicted or end up having to taper off benzodiazepines? Is there like a certain subset of people that end up like high functioning people, or is it just like a complete mix of everyone?
To be honest, it's a complete mix of everyone. I do see sometimes, it seems to me that it's very sensitive people.
Mm.
The people who are addictive personalities, who get away with drinking and smoking and unhealthy lifestyle, in my opinion, seem to have, and in my experience, seem to have less trouble coming off benzodiazepines. So, for example, me, I was trained as from my mother from early age, be very careful with medication. Take only the lowest dose. Don't take it if you don't really have to. And then there was just the sensitivity. If I had smoked some marijuana at some point, I was already feeling unwell. I didn't drink. If I drank a little bit too much, I was out. So there was this sensitivity already going on. So I would say just sensitivity, but for the rest, it's men, it's women, it's strong military people, it is high achieving people, very bright doctors, and it is the neighbor next door, just taking care of the old cat. So there's unfortunately no other prediction than I would say the sensitivity.
Right. Okay. So it could be like they're quite sensitive, as in like with other drugs as well, as in terms of like painkillers, alcohol, marijuana, so to speak. So it's basically
Yeah. Although I must say, now thinking a little bit longer about this, sometimes people get away with doing quite a lot of things until they cannot get away with it anymore. So they drink. This happens sometimes. They did take benzodiazepines for a while and they could just stop it. I've had many conversations with people who said, I started antidepressants and I've started this medication and I could stop it and I switched it and I did this and I did this. Why is it that I cannot stop this drug anymore? So there is that as well. There is a moment in the body where the body just says, that was it. I'm not playing this game anymore. I can't fix you right now. You are on your own. It seems to me that this is a process that I see a lot as well. So the fact that you tapered once or twice will actually also predict for me that maybe one day you will not get away with it anymore. And the third time can be, your downfall.
So
Well, that's
once
not
you
your
tape,
downfall, but it can be very hard.
so once you've tapered, you should really just go no more. Basically, it shouldn't be a crutch, so to speak.
100%. No longer an option, especially if you have experienced withdrawal symptoms. Don't ever go back on it. So there is a process in alcohol that's been called by the medical community as kindling. And in the benzodiazepine world, and maybe also the antidepressant world, they started to use this word as a process of kindling as well. So if you restart, it's like your body comes back with a vengeance if you try to stop it. The starting itself can sometimes be safe, and sometimes people already start experiencing, oh, wait, this is working against me now. I thought it would work for me, but it's working against me. And then the taper is really, really, really unkind and unpleasant, where before they were fine.
Yeah, I mean that kind of brings me to. Sorry, I'm bringing up another celebrity because obviously lots of celebrities end up being drug addicts and stuff. Russell Brand, who's now completely teetotal, and the reason why is because he said that if he starts, he he'll just completely collapse into that world, and that's really fascinating. And Liz, in terms of being a taper coach, do you just taper with benzos or do you taper with other drugs, so to speak?
Yes, so we taper antidepressants and antipsychotics and opiates. All of them have a similar problem, and that is just the suffering that you deal with when you try to reduce it. And also the problem is that the way the pharmaceutical companies offer you these drugs, it comes in quite high dosages. So you cannot really reduce in a very easy small step. So for example, my own drug, the venlafaxine that I'm taking, 37.5 milligrams is the lowest dose. Actually, right now I'm on 15 milligrams.
Hmm.
It doesn't exist, right? So I have to create my own medication. Every 2 weeks I do that. I create my own capsules. When it comes to benzodiazepines, a lot of times these tablets need to be shaved down. We need to water them. And this is, it's almost with all of these drugs that they are not offered in a way that you can taper them safely. And this is like the part of the challenge. So yeah, besides that, it's just a mental challenge. Like, how am I going to do this? So for me, the coaching is about informing people about the choices that they have, about the interaction with medication, with their lifestyle, alcohol, coffee, sugar, food, sleep deprivation, maybe all the activities that they do in life, and how to find the balance in order to come off safely, how to be a mental healthy person going down. That's just not easy. So it doesn't matter if you go crazy from a drug. I can support you because I know what that's like. It's sort of like that.
So that's brilliant. And actually, because I mean, I was more gearing towards like alcohol because I know that there's a lot of alcoholics around, obviously because it's a legal drug. Um, and I I've experienced people in my life who have had alcohol withdrawal, and it looks awful. And they're in the hospital. They had a heart attack and stroke,
Very
and they
similar.
yeah, it doesn't look pleasant. So I've
The alcohol actually binds to receptors that the benzodiazepine binds to as well. So it's like benzodiazepines, in a way, are alcohol in a pill for some. I know that they do even more than that probably, but so I would recommend rather. No, I'm not going to say that. I wanted to say it's better to drink than to have benzodiazepines, but it seems that way sometimes. But it's really like alcohol and benzodiazepines are very much related. And also, if you go to an addiction clinic and you need to taper alcohol or you need to withdraw from alcohol, a lot of times they offer you benzodiazepines to help you in the process.
Right. I mean, yeah, I suppose the fear with that, I don't know about the clinic, I say it because I'm not an expert, but having benzodiazepines and alcohol at the same time is probably like one of the worst things you can do.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, this is just, let's say this is just an opinion with very little knowledge. Offering alcohol or offering benzodiazepines, to replace alcohol is probably giving two options that could be taken at the same time. I don't know if someone does, but I can imagine that.
Well, hopefully they've checked the person if they really want to come off the alcohol. And then when they offer the benzodiazepines, it's tapered, usually, if they do their job right, within 2 weeks, like within 10 days, they taper off the benzodiazepines. But I think a lot of times it doesn't work because probably the alcohol does similar damage and gives similar stress in the body when you withdraw from it as when you take benzodiazepines. And maybe that's why a lot of times people try to become sober, but they can't because there is not enough understanding that this is a process that should have been done maybe slowly. And because alcohol is such a social accepted drug, it's very easy to just get a drink and you don't really approach it in the same way as medication. So medication is like, I didn't choose this to be in my life forever. I just took it for a moment and I wanted to stop it. So the psychological social dependency isn't there so much with benzodiazepines as with alcohol, because alcohol a lot of times has become a much more social thing as well.
Yeah, I think that's why it can be quite dangerous. I mean, I would say I do drink and kind of just, but I've seen it become, and even within myself, become a bit much, and it feels different to like a medication, like a painkiller. So
I actually had a story with from a man here in the Netherlands. He shared the story that he became addicted quite early on in life. So he was like before his 20s, or maybe beginning of his 20s, he wanted to stop drinking. He went into and doing all the other things that he was doing. I don't know the whole mixture, but he went into a clinic and they gave him benzodiazepines. He never had them before in his life, and he thought, wow, that is wonderful. That is the easiest thing that it can absolutely replace alcohol. For him, it was alcohol in a pill, and he loved it. And he went for it, and then he had an addiction on benzodiazepine. So he went in the clinic, with the alcohol addiction, and he came out with benzodiazepine. Like he just found his new drug. And a year later, at some point, he wanted to come off, and he felt like whatever I do when I go to get help, they give me more pills, and he didn't want that anymore. And so he quit cold turkey, which was a very, very dangerous thing to do because ever since then he created epileptic insults. So this is the risk. You cannot just stop. And this is actually why they also do not give people with alcohol addiction a cold turkey, because you can create responses like that in the body, and insult can be, a risk with alcohol as well. So this is why you have to be very careful with some drugs. Your body is not ready for such a change.
yeah, of course. So, Liz, sorry, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and something that we like to do is is now becoming a thing. Are there any messages that you'd love to give to, based on what we've been speaking about? Would there be any messages you'd love to give to the audience, and anyone else who's listening?
So I think, first of all, thank you for having me on the show and to, listen to this story. I think it's not been talked about a lot, and I think it's good to be on, a different platform than I would I would place it in the benzo community, for example. Nobody outside that community really listens to it, probably. So I think that the people listening to this story and taking medication, they should just think for themselves, how they respond to medication, what it's doing for them, what it's maybe not doing for them. And before you ever taper, you really have to inform yourself very carefully about how to do that safely. And unfortunately, right now, and this is 2023, doctors are not really always well informed. So even though they are the health professionals, you have to inform yourself beyond the medical professionals. And you have to, at least, I want you to inform yourself, because you can still make the decision, if you want to just cut 25% of your medication and do that for 1 week and do the next 25% the week after. But then that's on you, right? Then you make that decision well informed. Um, you cannot always trust the medical experts in this process. And I love it that there are medical doctors who try to become informed, and there are really just a couple of doctors who try to support this community, but there are way, way, way too little. So that's the first thing I would definitely want to convey to people.
So thank you, Liz. And I honestly, I don't think I've covered enough. I want to go on for longer, but I tried to keep it within an hour. I really would love to have you on at some point later as well to discuss other, other effects and on the brain, because we've had that talk privately. And I will put your link on the description below the podcast episode. So please do visit her, Liz's website. And thank you very much, Liz.
Yes. The tapercoach.com.
Thetapercoach.com. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dad, for having me, and all the luck to you and your beautiful podcast.
Cheers. Thank you.